when you talk to your guest at the end of the interview, ask them who they think would be a good fit for the show. And almost every time they will recommend somebody who they personally know and can connect you to. Mm-hmm. All of my big guests have always come from personal connections. They have never once come from a cold pitch, which not to say that you can't do cold pitches, but if you get good at working the network, it makes it happen way faster.
Welcome back to the Spear and Clover podcast, the show about the art of crushing your goals and the discipline of loving your life while you do. I'm your host, Jason Skisick, the entrepreneurial evangelist, and each week I bring you the stories of visionaries who see the world as it could be and can't help but take action. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and review. This is the best way to stay in the loop when we drop new content. If you enjoy this episode, please take a moment and share it with a friend. If you've been listening to the show, you know that I love talking to other entrepreneurs. But it's an extra special treat when I get to interview entrepreneurs who help other people become entrepreneurs. They are like the gasoline being poured on my favorite fire. Today's guest is a full tank of entrepreneurial and podcasting fire. He is the founder of Grow the Show and a coaching and education program designed to help people launch and grow professional podcasts. He is also the host of both Grow the Show podcast as well as the Philly Who podcast, the show highlighting the doers, thinkers, and performers of Philadelphia. Please welcome my podcasting mentor and all-around great guy, Kevin Chemidlin. I know I butchered that. I'll do the whole thing over again. What's your last name?
No, Chemidlin. It's all good.
Kevin, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, man. And let me tell you, no worries. You are not the first person. You got it better than most people do on the first try. So I give you credit there.
Yeah. Off mic, I was telling you my name's Skisick and I was in the Army. So I've heard it all. I apologize. So Kevin, how you feeling today, man?
I feel great. I'm pumped to be here. It's Monday. Awesome start to the week. Just made a sweet announcement. So I'm living life, man. I'm having a great time.
Yeah, you just launched your third version of your Grow the Show podcasting education software. I have built products like that in the past. I know how difficult that can be. I know what that process is like. How long have you been working on that?
Yeah, so we've been working on 3.0. It's not necessarily software, but just like an overall level of service with our clients that we help grow and monetize their shows. And so we really started working on it in earnest, I'd say 3 or 4 months ago. And this was a much bigger lift than going to 2.0. So in short, the Grow the Show program includes coaching, it includes a course, it includes community, and 3 months of done-for-you editing. And Grow the Show 1.0 to 2.0 was a course refresh, which was great. Like people learned way more, got way better results from the 2.0 version of the course. 2.0 to 3.0 is a service refresh, meaning we're adding one-on-one coaching, we're adding direct Slack support, we are adding several other things just to really have us, the Grow the Show team, have a much, much heavier hand in actually guiding our clients as they implement what we teach them. So I'm pumped about it because it's going to just like skyrocket our client results. And it's been really fun to dig more into how we can design a product that makes it as easy as possible for folks to get the results that they want to get, which is a little bit of a different approach than when I leaned almost entirely on making the course so that it teaches them everything they need to know, And so that's why I'm excited.
Yeah, it's hard, and I'm sure we'll dig into that a little bit more. Before we do, though, what is it that you love about the art form? What is it that you love about podcasting? Because you made a pretty big change in your life to move towards podcasting.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece, there's a lot, but what really drew me to the medium in the first place was how it seemed to me that in a world where everything that we consume is getting shorter and shorter, how can we make this 15-second video 10 seconds? Podcasting, well, it is getting shorter.
Sure.
Is just like the shortest episodes of podcasting are like 10, 15, 20 minutes. And that's considered a short episode. And that's considered a long of anything else. So for me, I was like, wow, this seems to be this island of nuance where it seems to be the only thing that folks are willing to consume today that can really dig into the details of things, whether you're learning something or, you're just kind of tuning into the discussion about something going on in the world today, or even comedy. Like, it's so much less transactional than the rest of our media world. And that was, for me, the initial draw as a listener. And then eventually I decided I wanted to make podcasts. I didn't have any background in media at all, but I just knew that I always had a hunch for performance. And I always just kind of liked making videos as a kid and stuff like that. So after 4 years, of a corporate career, I realized I didn't want to do what I was doing, which was software. And I instead wanted to get into media and, just enter the conversation, enter the arena. And for me, it was just an obvious choice to do podcasting because that's the place that I feel like people would give me enough time to actually like dive into deep topics that can actually impact people's lives.
Yeah, I feel very much the same way. I always describe it as I like things that have capital T truth, right? And so for me, it's been CrossFit in the past, like whatever's the best way to move this weight, that's how we'll do it. And then it's jujitsu, it's whatever the most effective thing is, that's what I like. Podcasting is the purest expression of that. There's nobody standing over our shoulder telling us what people are going to like, or aside from you, what people are going to like or what's going to work. No, I'm just kidding. But
no, it's good.
but you're right. I mean, if we were just having this conversation the other day, I forget who I was talking to, but if somebody would have told the president of Fox in 2010 that long form, uninterrupted conversations that veered off topic and sometimes didn't have closed loops was going to be one of the biggest things in media in some cases. Yeah. Just don't think anybody would have seen that coming. Was this something that you entered into as a hobby, or was this something you entered into to make an escape from the 9-to-5?
From the very start, it was intended to be an escape to the 9-to-5. It was not my first attempt at the escape, and several failed attempts where I got thrown back into the cell after it failed. Yeah. No, but after several entrepreneurial ventures, each one of which pretty much gave me a discrete lesson or skill that I would then stack and apply. Mm-hmm. This was the latest in a few after 4 years. And I will say that this was the one where I was most okay with it not rescuing me from the 9-to-5. Like for that one, after several failed attempts at startups and apps and products and stuff, I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick something this time where if it doesn't quote unquote work, it's not going to be the end of the world. And maybe that's why it actually did work because I kind of enjoyed doing it way more. Like it wasn't a means to an end of, I was running towards something rather than away from something with it. Yeah. And so because of that, it worked really quickly. I launched my original show, Philly Who, in the May of 2018. And by July of 2018, left the corporate job. Now, financially, it was ill-advised. Like I wasn't generating revenue yet. And I didn't know it at the time, but I didn't know the first thing about how to make, grow, and monetize a great show. But I had some savings because I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I just was like, I don't care. I actually set a deadline for myself. I was like, I'm leaving this job. At the time, I said April 2018, I'm out. The deadline served its purpose because it got me actually to take it seriously and start pushing towards building something. Once the deadline came, I needed a little extra time. And so I pushed it back to July, and then I took the leap. So you mentioned a couple of other startups. Maybe give us your entrepreneurial origin story. At what point did you start to think that maybe you want to run your own thing? And if you're comfortable sharing, what are some of the things that you tried over the years? Totally. I always, since I've been alive, have been running my own thing. When I was 8 years old, I ran a wiffle ball league in my backyard. Me and 10 friends would play each other solo. For 6 weeks, the beginning of every summer after school let out. Like I would make a schedule. It would be a round robin schedule. Everybody had 2 games. Everybody had to umpire 2 games. Like it was even. Nobody ever had 2 games in a day. Like it was crazy, man. Like I had a website with all the statistics. Like I was a commissioner. And to me, it wasn't weird. I just was like, that's what I wanted. I just couldn't wait to get out of school to do that. In 6th grade, I had a pencil rental business till I got in trouble. Like everyone would forget pencils for class. So I would just rent them for $1. I was making bank, giving people pencils for a class period. And then I got in trouble. So I kind of always did this stuff. But at the same time, though, I always was not a teacher's pet, but I always aimed to please authority, if you will. So plus, growing up, I had blue collar parents. My father was a crane operator. My mother was stay at home until the Great Recession. Then she went back to school to become a teacher. And so even still, the values that they instilled in me was security, especially after the recession. To get a job that's, secure, that pays well, that you're not going to worry, if my dad's crane, a construction job would end and sometimes he wouldn't work for 3 months, Sure. So don't blame them. I would have taught my kids the same thing. So I went down that path and studied computer science instead of studying entrepreneurship or music, which I probably could have done well in either path. And won that, got decent grades, got a great, salary job out of school. And within 4 years, it was 6 figures. So got promoted fast. Like it was, won that game. The whole time though, that whole 4 years, I wanted to have a business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I just felt, number one, like that was too risky, that I would be betraying my family. if I did that and gave up the steady job, because I had won, like that's what they always pined for, was security and a high salary. And I had done it. I had delivered it. So I felt bad about not wanting what I had. And also just in general, I just felt so lucky that I had a job that was, to me, fairly easy. I wasn't the best software developer ever, but I was good enough and it wasn't too hard. And I just felt like, man, who am I to, especially living in Philadelphia, where there's a lot, you're just surrounded by poverty, no matter what neighborhood you live in. And so I just felt ungrateful by wanting something different. Nonetheless, I started many different ventures. First, it was a music recording studio in my basement, but then I didn't like that because I didn't like spending my nights and weekends on music. Like the creative juices weren't flowing and it just was no good. Then I started writing software to help roommates split up utility bills and keep track of who owes who what. I couldn't get my roommates to test it. And I just, again, would come home and just be too tired to write more software. After that, I met a partner who's a good friend of mine now. And we came up with this idea. It was his idea, but I fell in love with it, for a social media app. This was 2017. And it was geolocated digital piñatas, which basically was, you could put any kind of media, like a video or text or something like that, in a piñata. You pick the shape of the piñata, and then you put that piñata on the map. It was just after Pokemon Go happened. So you would put the piñata on the map, and you can make it so that anybody who is on the app can see it, or you can make it just available for certain people. And then people could only open the piñata when they were at the place on the map. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing. Like I had a friend drop a bunch of piñatas for me all over Barcelona the first time I went there. And like, I got to do this like little mini tour thing, and I didn't know what I was going to each time. Like it worked out. Yeah. And we had 500 users in a month, which was cool. But then Snapchat, literally in June 2017, I'll never forget it. They debuted Snapchat Maps like overnight. They're like, oh, you can do Snapchat on Maps now. And we were like, wow, that's exactly what we're doing. So I was sad, but I also was actually super relieved because I don't know. I was like, am I the geolocated digital piñatas guy? So thankfully I'm not. Then from there, it was a lockbox to keep your packages safe while, because Philly's a city of row homes, and, UPS would deliver an Amazon package and it'd be gone in 20 minutes. Like they just leave it outside your door and someone would take it. So it was like that. But then I discovered I was on the phone with China. I was like flying around trying to meet like product designers and stuff. I got totally fleeced for like 20 grand by these product designers who were going to design this product and help me, get it manufactured and everything, just completely fleeced. And then when that happened, I was like, all right, I don't know what I'm doing here. So I took a break for like 6 months from entrepreneurship, kind of like got my bearings, read 4-Hour Workweek, which made me stop feeling bad about wanting what I wanted. And I was like, oh, other people do this. Other people want this. I'm not a terrible human being for wanting to live a life of freedom and ownership. And 2 months after that, I had the idea for the podcast.
That's so interesting. I feel like every entrepreneur has sort of an ember inside of them that is the fuel. Like, but before anybody's ever given you $1, before anybody's ever, I forget them, I can't think of the word, but before anybody's ever, told you that you deserve to be an entrepreneur, there's that ember that's inside of you. And I don't know if you've spent a lot of time thinking about what the source of yours is. But it feels like, when I speak to entrepreneurs, it feels like it's either usually some version of, I felt like I could be more. I felt like there was something that needed to exist that didn't, so I had to make it. There's a responsibility to it. Or it's like, I felt like I could rise up my family and potentially ascend for others. Have you thought about that at all for yourself? Does any of that strike for you?
I mean, I'd say I've been in all three of those places at different stages in different chapters. So for Philly Who, it was, I think I can be more, for sure. I was like, I could be doing more than this. I could 100%. And I was right. But I was afraid also of that not being true. That also played into me not making a move because, there's a fear. What if I try this and I actually can't be more? Right.
Yeah.
But it wound up being true. And so that was Philly Who. And then it was for Grow the Show, which is, I actually don't do the Philly show anymore. I actually relocated. But for Grow the Show, that was very much seeing a need and seeing something that should exist. Because what you said earlier about the podcasting industry, it's wonderful that it's so decentralized. And, there's just so many benefits to it. There's no guidelines. There's no big companies that decide the algorithm. There's just so many, there's just like no barrier to entry, which is good. But those are all of those things are equally challenges, right? They're equally drawbacks. So, and because of that, in my opinion, the vast majority of podcasters have very few listeners. Most podcasters have fewer than 150, which is what we call the friends and family zone. So most podcasters just have their friends and family just listening to them.
Right.
And and so I aim to help provide a little bit of guidance and a little bit, you said earlier, like, except for you. And I'm like, yes, we need someone to help us give some guidelines. It can't be totally open season or else everyone's going to fail because everyone's just doing what they see everybody else do. But guess what? Nobody else has any listeners. So you're doing what podcasters who have no listeners do. So for that, I was like, okay, I figured this out with Philly Who, which it took me a while to figure out. I floundered for a year, went seriously into credit card debt and came this close to going back to the corporate job, but was too deathly afraid of, admitting that I can't actually do this. So powered through, and I can talk about it if you want, but figured out how to actually do it and then lived the life. 2019 was paradise. I was working on my podcast 20 to 30 hours a week. I had a couple extra entrepreneurial things here and there because I just can't seem to not do that. But, I was traveling. I had a house, paid a mortgage all from the podcast revenue. And I kept hearing from other podcasters, like, how did you do this? How did you figure this out? And so I was like, okay, the industry needs some help. And so that's kind of what I've been doing since then. And then as far as the family stuff goes, once Grow the Show started, I really started to see indicators that Grow the Show was onto something that we had found, that we had struck a nerve, and we were putting something out there that the industry really, really is hungry for. And I started to see the potential of it. Then I was like, wow, I could make some moves here that could have impacts, have a financial impact for not only myself, but my immediate family. And so, like I said, I feel like all of those things I have felt and have been a primary driver at a different stage. But the one that really got me into the arena was the first one, which was, I think that I could be more, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I definitely feel a similar way about it. When you talk about Philly Who, it sounds like you're not doing it anymore, which I didn't realize. But one of the things that I love about this medium, about podcasting, about being in this seat, about being a host, is the access that I get to people who otherwise I just wouldn't have a reason to talk to. It's not like they're jerks, but there's no reason for me to talk to the owner of this moving company, or the owner of this, software company, or the owner of, this podcasting, company. So when you started Philly Who, which clearly highlights folks from Philadelphia that kind of fall into those categories, how quickly were you able to start getting access to more and more interesting and important people? And what was that process like?
So it happened virtually immediately. I was lucky enough to have a couple of contacts to a couple of well-known Philadelphians. One of them was a NCAA basketball coach, total legend of Temple University. His name's Fran Dunphy. I took his class in school. And so I knew him well. I had his cell phone number. And so I had an idea that he would do the show. I also had volunteered extensively at a nonprofit called Alex's Lemonade Stand. It's fairly well known, at least very well known in the Philly area. It's nationally known too. And just had made a couple other connections here and there. So I knew I could start with some impressive names. I knew that I could leverage those to at least have my pitch read by their peers. And also, before starting the show, I listened to and read and consumed pretty much everything that Tim Ferriss has ever put out about how to be a podcaster, right?
Huge fan of him. Yeah.
Yeah. And little tips, just ask when you talk to your guest at the end of the interview, ask them who they think would be a good fit for the show. And almost every time they will recommend somebody who they personally know and can connect you to. All of my big guests have always come from personal connections. They have never once come from a cold pitch. Which, not to say that you can't do cold pitches, but if you get good at working the network, it makes it happen way faster. So, and the other piece of advice that Tim Ferriss gave that I took immediately was to go to a conference and just be the most helpful person at that conference, helpful and interested, and just meet as many people as you can, make contacts. And then as soon as you leave the conference, just hit them up and ask if they would come on your show. And so I went to South by Southwest in 2018 before I even launched the show. It was March 2018. And I didn't tell there was a whole activation about Philadelphia at South by Southwest for 2 whole days. This whole building was taken over by Philly. It was called the Amplify Philly House. And the whole 2 days they were having sessions with these incredible Philadelphians who flew into the conference. And, everybody wanted to represent Philly at South by Southwest. So I literally just showed up and helped the organizers, sat at every talk, asked questions, and talked to the speakers afterwards, and didn't tell a single one of them, hey, I didn't pitch any of them. I didn't say, hey, I'm launching a podcast. Hey, will you be on the show? I just was talking to them. Hey, I love Philadelphia. Asked them questions. The organizers, somebody didn't show up as a volunteer. So I put on a shirt and I was the bouncer for the VIP area for 2 hours, just being there,
Yeah.
And then as soon as the conference was over, I hit everybody who I met, who I listened to talk. I was like, oh my gosh, they would be a great guest. I hit them up and I invited 10 people and 9 of them said yes. And the other one said, I'm traveling, hit me up in 6 months. And one of them was the CEO of La Colombe Coffee, which is based in Philly, just incredible, superhuman billionaire guy. And so he was guest number 8, So anyway, that's kind of how I got there. And then from there, just did the same thing. Asked him, who do you think would be a good fit for the show? He introduced me to another billionaire Philadelphian, and just like let the seeds of the initial connections germinate into this branch of incredible people, because they all know each other. They're all friends. And, if you just pitch them in their inbox, you're just going to get batted away by an assistant. But if, you show up in their life by vis-a-vis connection of like a friend and a peer that they respect, who said, hey, you should chat with this person. You're going to be on their calendar next week. Like you'll be amazed how not busy these people are, because they're so good at protecting their time. And so if you're just able to, get into their world in a trusted manner, in a manner that they trust, it's actually not that hard.
Yeah. And I've experienced that as well. I was trying to have, I think, 12 done by the time that I launched. And I think I had 30 just from networking and things like that. Just as a side note, you have some Tim Ferriss vibes for sure. Just even listening to you talk and knowing sort of the structure of the way the course works and everything.
Yeah.
So, shout out to you, because I also am a big fan of him, but I think that he and I would agree that we're not very similar. So if I were thinking about moving to Philadelphia, tell me why I should move to Philadelphia.
It is the biggest small town in the world, in the country. Yet it has the resources of the fifth largest city in the country, or whatever it is. It might be 7th by now. But it's just an incredible, incredible place to foster community really quickly. Like to get to just be in a huge major city and get all the good stuff and all the opportunity that comes with that, while getting the community vibes of a small town, because everybody knows each other. And, it's just a really, really deep community. And it's not hard to quickly become well known in that community if you just contribute to it, right? If you just participate. And I've been selling Philly for 12 years.
Yeah.
I bought a house there at 23, a 3-bedroom home, which I loved. I sold it in 2021. And I had a blast. I got to buy a home at 23 and within walking distance of everything. Like it was just so cool. I moved this year. I relocated to Miami. And the reason I did that, for a few reasons, none of them actually having to do with the city of Philadelphia itself. It was all personal reasons. I lived there for 12 years and just kind of felt the itch to explore a little bit. I'll be back. But yeah, like to me, for any young entrepreneur, it's a smaller pond with the big fish of a huge pond.
Yeah, I feel like we're entering an age of what I call like tier 2 cities. I hadn't thought of Philadelphia, but Nashville, Austin, Denver, Portland, those are places where previously the type of talent that are moving there now would previously only go to New York, LA, Chicago, right?
Exactly.
And it feels like now it's much more accessible, especially since COVID and everybody a lot of people going remote. Feels like now you can have a great life in St. Louis. I mean, you can crush in St. Louis, and Philadelphia sounds much the same way. Yeah. So moving on, you took what I think is one of the most interesting and for me, respectable paths for somebody who does a deep dive and really learns a discipline. And that is, you decided to start to coach other people. Now that you've gotten up over the hill, you're trying to reach back and pull people over the hill. But I know from personal experience, sort of the mental struggle that it takes to finally admit to yourself or give yourself permission to take that plunge. Talk to us maybe a little bit about the process where you went from podcaster to somebody who was like, I can teach you how to podcast.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I had to be convinced that, and I didn't actually realize the extent to which I had achieved what so many people were struggling to achieve with my original podcast. Like I didn't know I was doing as well comparatively as I was. So, I mean, the way it worked out was by the end of 2019, Philly Who was really killing it, man. I was getting just conversations with, like, I had previous mayors reaching out to me. Like, it was just so cool. And at the same time, like I said, I had managed to 4-hour work week my way into that show, not being too much of a time suck for me. So what did I use the extra time with? Well, to start another business. So I created a production agency for big media companies. And so our clients included Comcast, NBC Universal, Tom Brady's media company, one of them, several others, iHeartRadio. And that, I didn't enjoy that work at all. That work totally sucks because media companies do not pay well and they don't listen to you when you tell them what to do. You were just there. They just want an editor. That's not what I wanted to do. So then COVID comes around. I think we had 7 really, really, really in-depth projects going with this agency. And I was going down the path of being like almost an NPR style podcast production agency, because my style of show is much more heavily produced than the average show. And so I was doing that for other companies. Wasn't fun, wasn't paying well, was working a ton, didn't like it. COVID happened, where all that work, all those contracts evaporated. Once again, massive failure happens to me, just like the geolocated pinatas. Something happens and I essentially lose what I was building. But when it happens, I'm more relieved than anything else. I don't know what that says, but
yeah, I want to hear more about that. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive into it because I've thought a lot about it.
Yeah.
And so, COVID happens. I still had Philly Who. Now, all of my guests postponed that I had scheduled because they were obviously all leading their organizations through the crisis. And it was just what didn't feel like a good time to be all, celebratory and whatever the word is, thinking back fondly, talking about your life stories. Like we had work to do. Everybody was in wartime mode. So I was just kind of sitting at home like everybody else was during quarantine. And the Comcast, NBC Universal, they doubled their project. So that I was good financially. And I thought, okay, I guess I had kind of been resisting. I had helped podcasters here and there, people who asked, but I was like, maybe this is a sign. I do enjoy being on camera. I love teaching, and I especially love creating frameworks. I especially love synthesizing knowledge and experience to make things easier for others. That is my favorite thing to do. And that is when I am in flow. It's when I'm like drawing on the whiteboard, trying to figure out an easier way for someone to do or understand something. And so I said, I said, I've got it. I know what the podcast industry needs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a coaching program and a course that will help podcasters become better interviewers, because that's what I thought everybody needed. Because I would listen to podcasts and I'd be like, these interviews suck. I'm such a better interview than this. Like, this is what people need. If they ask better questions, their show would grow. Yeah. So I spoke to a mentor and I told him this big idea that I had. And I was about to go spend 6 months making the website, building the course, doing making the production value videos. He says, okay, cool idea. Hear me out. Go talk to 12 podcasters that you know, and don't ask them if they would be interested in learning how to become a better interviewer. Ask them what they need help with. Ask them what questions they have. Ask them where they need support. I was like, fine, okay, whatever. So I did that. And I actually had enough podcasting connections that I had for over the course of 3 weeks. I had 30-minute conversations with 30 podcasters. Wow. Every single one of them. Some of them worked at startups. Some of them were independent, just starting out. Some of them have been doing it for 3 years. You name it. Every single type of podcaster without fail. Not one of them said, I really wish I could learn how to be a better interviewer. In fact, they all thought they were the best interviewers. However, every single one of them said, how do I get new listeners and how do I monetize this thing? Every time. And by the fifth one, I was like, By the 30th one, I was like, okay, I know what I must do. And that's how I discovered that, because I was like, oh, well, they'd be like, how'd you get these sponsors? And I was just like, oh, well, you go on LinkedIn, do this, and, discover this, discover that. Here's a proposal, send them this, and then you book them at this CPM. And they're like, oh my God, how did you learn this? How do you do this? Same thing with growing listeners. They're like, how did you get these listeners? I was like, oh, I went on Instagram. I did this. I engaged here for 15 minutes. Then I went to this event. Then I went to, I just listed it out and didn't realize that other people hadn't figured this out. And also just didn't realize the extent to which the vast majority of podcasters are floundering and just totally struggling, no growth, no monetization, no idea what to do. So I was like, damn, I really do have a significant amount of knowledge here that other people don't have, or at least they haven't figured out yet. I can help them. And then I looked up website domains and growtheshow.com was available. And I was like, that's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah. I was like, that's it. That's gotta be holy crap. That's unbelievable. And then, I had plenty more moments where I had to be really pushed and made uncomfortable to become a coach, to share, which is kind of your question. But that was kind of how I got to that point. Yeah.
And there's a ton to unpack there, but I want to go back because everybody listening to this right now heard everything you just said, but they want to go back and dig in on the relief that you felt when that last mission didn't go through. And to kind of prompt you, my wife Donna said something to me once, and I never forgot it. She said, we were talking about phone sales, and she says, every time the phone is ringing, I secretly hope that they don't pick up. And I'm like, oh, well, babe, you don't have to do phone sales ever again. That's definitely not your jam. Because she's somebody, and I think most entrepreneurs are, and you certainly seem to be, somebody who, when there's a chance to take responsibility, they raise their hand. I'm that way. Got it in the Army. If there needs to be a volunteer, I'm here. I'll do it. But maybe you don't see the path that you're going down. Maybe we're walking up a hill, but on the other side of the hill, it gets pretty hairy. And so it sounds to me like you entered into this and maybe raised your hands for that responsibility there was a necessity in the world, But maybe talk us through what that felt like, why you feel like you might have been relieved when that burden was taken off your shoulders.
That's fascinating. And I think I've never heard that before about responsibility. And I identify with that 100%. That resonates deeply. And you say that, I'm like, oh my God, yes. And I just now realized how exhausting it has been in my 30 years to always be the one who takes responsibility, because nobody else ever does. Maybe that's why.
And it's all we did. Like, it's all I want to do. I'm literally like shopping myself to people right now because I'm unemployed. I'm semi-retired right now. And I'm literally like, where can I take responsibility? So
exactly.
Go ahead. I hear you.
Yeah. So it's a blessing and a curse, right? And so, I mean, the two main moments that come to mind where something got essentially ripped away in some way, shape, or form, and I felt relief more than anything else, was the geolocated digital pinatas app and this production agency. And I think in both cases, it was because I was doing something not that I actually truly wanted to do. Like, I was not lit up about geolocated digital pinatas. I don't give a crap about social media, and I was making a social media app, right? I also didn't, I don't know, like the work that we were doing, we had some sexy projects for the agency, but I also knew that nobody was going to hear any of the stuff because the folks I was chatting with didn't know how to get listeners, even at major media companies. I'm like, nobody's going to listen to this. So, and like, I just didn't see a clear path forward to happiness. Like, I was grinding it out, not getting paid well. And I was like, I literally, if somebody said like, what's the end game here? For me, I was like, I don't know, maybe we'll get acquired. Cause that was in the days when, like, that year, there were a bunch of big acquisitions by Spotify. Spotify bought Gimlet. Spotify bought Gimlet. Another company bought Cadence 13. Another company bought Pineapple Street Studios. So these big, like, high touch podcast production studios were getting bought up at incredible valuations and dollar amounts. So I was like, I guess that's what I'm doing. Like, I'll just grow this thing and then maybe sell it to somebody someday. I don't know, but I didn't actually like doing it. So I think that's why, because now, like, I've reflected on that a ton and have been like, what does it mean that I felt so much relief? Is it revisionist history where I was just like looking on the bright side? Because there's probably a little bit of that too at the time, where I was just like staying positive and finding a reason, to be relieved. Like, well, I didn't like that anyway, But at the same time, though, I think about what would happen if for some reason Grow the Show was taken away. Like, either, I don't know, like everyone's talking about some sort of crash. I think we'll be fine because this business was born in the depths of the COVID recession.
You think darkness is your ally?
Yeah, I was born in it, molded by it. But, I'm like, if it's happened before, particularly with COVID, when that happened, none of us were expecting that. So now we're like, okay, things that we don't expect and can't imagine can happen. I think that's why everyone's so damn anxious now. So I thought, like, what if that were to happen, something that I'm not anticipating to Grow the Show? And I'm like, I don't know if I would feel relieved. I think I'd be actually pretty upset because I truly enjoy doing this. I work really hard and have to, I love what the mission of the show. Like, I still have to work to make sure that I'm enjoying my life, because it's so easy to ignore that when you have the disposition that we have as entrepreneurs. It's so easy to just go all in on the business and just go all in on, putting off any enjoyment until later. And you got to balance that. But this is the one where I don't know if I would be too relieved. So, like I said, I've reflected on it a ton. I think there probably is a degree of, well, it's not my fault. There's nothing I can do in both of those cases. Snapchat, overnight, our app was in 300 million pockets. COVID happens. Nothing I could do about that. So there's like, it's the one thing that I have no control over. So it's like, well, there's nothing that wasn't a failure of me.
Yeah, but it's like if you're not ready to go play a soccer game, and then the day before you break your ankle, and you're like,
right,
oh, I have permission to stay home. And it's like, oh, shucks. Oh, guys, I wish I could be out there. And I've had moments, I don't want to, dwell on this too much, but I've had moments in my life like that. And looking back in hindsight, it's funny because our identities, especially the younger we are, our identities are so wrapped up in sort of our momentum, what it is that we're doing. And so it's like, I'm a soccer player. Let's use that metaphor. I'm a soccer player. I'm the soccer player guy. I wear the shirts. I hang out with the cheerleaders and the team. And it's Saturday, so we're playing soccer. And it's like, but deep down, you're like, man, I wish I was doing X, but I don't have not very many people can say, like, I'm running out of steam on the metaphor, but I guess there's not many people. There's a lot of people that end up with the wrong person. There's not a lot of people who stop the wedding. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of people that are like, hey, I know that we've already put a $30,000 deposit or whatever craziness, but I don't think this is right, and we got to stop now. It's
Sunk costs.
an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I have shared in different times, there was a business we were starting in 2020 that just wasn't quite aligned with core values and mission for us. And that, when it got shut down, felt like a relief. My gym felt like my heart was being ripped out.
Yeah.
Shout out to Bucktown CrossFit. And that's why, if I may, I would like to say that if you were not able to do Grow the Show, what you would miss is the capital T tribe that I have watched, that I've seen with my own two eyes. You have a real tribe of people who look to you to be the charismatic central figure. Well, that's responsibility. That's a pack that's never heavy, I bet, for you.
Oh, no. I have the most energy after coaching calls, which there's one in 45 minutes. And I'm looking forward
good to know.
And I'm looking forward to just that. Like when time does not exist.
Nope.
Those coaching calls will go. I remember I've had clients say like, man, thanks for coming on here for 2 hours. I'm like, it's been 2 hours. I thought it was like 20 minutes.
A dentist appointment. Yeah.
I'm like, holy crap, that's crazy. And like afterwards, it's like I did, our coaching calls are at 4 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. And so it's 6 p.m. Eastern on Monday. And I feel like I just had a cup of coffee. It's, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, let's go, let's build. So I think you're absolutely right. And it's funny because I don't even know how that happened, how we got to that point.
Today's show is brought to you by High Level CRM. High Level is an all-in-one platform designed to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses without the need for multiple softwares or an IT team. Not only does their easy-to-use software allow you to track and manage your leads throughout each phase of the relationship, but it also allows you to build funnels, track stats, and more. Guys, I sat down and added up the cost of software I was able to replace with just one app, and it was over $1,000 per month. Because this is an all-in-one application, I also save a ton of headaches connecting apps and building automations, and the team at Go High Level does a great job of getting you started quickly and easily when you sign on. I cannot more highly recommend these guys. Right now, Spear and Clover listeners get a free 14-day trial of High Level CRM for themselves. Click the link in our show notes to support the show and get started on your free 14-day trial today. I'm super excited that today's show is brought to you by the Global School of Entrepreneurship. Most practicing entrepreneurs cannot take 2 years away from their growing business to attend a full-time campus-based program or spend every weekend away from family and business for a couple of years. Finally, there's an accredited program specifically designed for you to work on and grow your business while completing your MBA. The GSE MBA complements the needs and schedules of someone actively engaged in an entrepreneurial venture while still covering the accredited curriculum expected from any MBA program. The Global School of Entrepreneurship offers a unique offering called the Mastermind to MBA program. It consists of 10 students who work together in a forum-style cohort and meet every other week for a year. The GSE MBA helps you develop skills in critical thinking and strategic planning. Students also develop competencies in leadership, decision-making, and communication with both employees as well as the important stakeholders in your business. You will be exposed to world-class academics and fascinating guest lecturers. You'll work on your business while working in your business. Students are guided by real-world entrepreneurs with decades of experience starting and scaling businesses just like yours. Best of all, I'm beyond proud to announce that the Global School of Entrepreneurship has agreed to offer one Spear and Clover listener a scholarship to join an upcoming Mastermind to MBA cohort. They are looking for someone just like you to bring a unique perspective to the program, and they are accepting applications right now. To learn more and to apply, simply go to www.gse.mba/spear. That's www.gse.mba/spear. Don't miss this opportunity to level yourself up and surround yourself with other like-minded entrepreneurs just like you. Once again, to apply for the GSE MBA Spear and Clover Scholarship, simply visit www.gse.mba/spear. That's www.gse.mba/spear. Today's show is brought to you by Scaling with Media. I mean, literally, like if it weren't for the folks at Scaling with Media, you would not be getting this. Scaling with Media is a truly revolutionary company for any entrepreneur who wants to reach a larger audience without taking on the years of experience necessary to master the required skills. These guys do it all. From helping you develop your creative plan to editing, sourcing content, copywriting, ads management, and way more. Whether you're looking to launch a YouTube channel or podcast, or you just want to scale your business out to more eyeballs, these guys are the absolute best one-stop shop. But that's not all. Right now, Spear and Clover listeners who sign up for their brand launch package will receive a free, that's right, free professional grade studio kit that I'm actually recording right now on. The studio kit includes a professional microphone, stand, lighting, and headphones, and is worth well over $500. Take action now by going to scalingwithmedia.com/spear and claim your free studio kit. Again, that's scalingwithmedia.com/spear, scalingwithmedia.com/spear. Now back to the show. You know, I mean, it's like, it's professionally, it's like personally, if somebody was like, what do you do when you have so many friends who are all so wonderful and kind to you? It's like, I don't know. I guess you keep them all. Like, I mean, that's right, what you do. So who should start a podcast? Because we do have this thing in our medium, similar to real estate or similar to maybe day trading in the past, or there's all these there's sort of these low barrier to entry, you know, entrepreneurial endeavors that people can take. And it seems like podcasting is having a time. If you had to give advice to somebody who's thinking about maybe starting a podcast, who do you think should do it, who shouldn't?
I haven't heard it phrased in that way before. Well, I think somebody who just wants attention shouldn't do it. Because getting attention is actually the hardest part of podcasting. Mm-hmm. It is the only medium that doesn't have attention built in. You can post a YouTube video and Google's going to show it to people. A TikTok is going to get seen. You post a podcast episode, not a single soul on the planet is going to hear it unless you yourself get them to press play and download the episode and go listen to it. So that's the biggest misconception I think that exists about podcasts, which is if you build it, they will come, and just be consistent. I can't tell you how many podcasts that has killed, that advice, that being consistent alone, just be consistent, keep it up. It'll work. It's going to pop. It's totally not. Something else might. YouTube, like Instagram, those things, like you be consistent, they will pop because they have algorithms. They have, big companies that are trying that have a vested interest in your content being seen because they will get paid when your content gets seen. That is not true at all with podcasting, unless you're posting it on YouTube, which is a big whole nother challenge thing. Mm-hmm. So, somebody who is just who thinks it's just a way to get attention is almost always sorely mistaken. Even celebrities, man. I can't tell you how many celebrities I've seen enter podcasting to only leave it 30 days later. Because even with their name and the amount of attention they can initially bring to the show, they think that podcasting is you just have a conversation and people listen to it. But there are former presidents who have quit podcasting because they couldn't get people to listen. If those people can't get people to listen to their show, then why does anybody else think that it's going to be that easy? So it's funny because I feel like the people who know the most about a medium, or like the experts, tend to just tell you, don't do it, about whatever it is they're an expert in. Yeah. And I don't want to sound like that.
No, I mean, that was the question though,
Yeah. That's what I would say.
It's good. It's interesting because that's a similar thing that happens in stand-up comedy is, you get the Kramer or whoever, these guys that have huge names and they stand up on stage, and you'll get that first minute from the crowd, and you can just see them eat shit after that, right? And it's one of those things, like I said earlier on in the podcast, it's that capital T truth. It's like, is this entertaining or is this not? I don't care if you're a president. I don't care if you're in my favorite movies or you're my favorite former quarterback or whatever it might be. I don't have even anybody in mind. At the end of the day, I'm driving to work and I want to be interested. I want to be engaged. It's late at night. I'm trying to get home. I want to stay awake, right? So, it's either it is interesting or it's not. What do you think generically makes for a good podcast idea?
I say something that is in a category of one. So there's a few answers to this. There's a couple ingredients, I think, to a great podcast idea. I call it a cat one premise, a category of one premise, whereas you can capital T truthfully say that this is the only podcast on the planet that blank. And that's hard to do because there's 3 million of them. Now, only a couple 100,000 actually are not dead. Most podcasts are dead. But if you can say this really is the only podcast. So for me, Grow the Show is the only podcast about how to grow a podcast where the episodes are narrative with voiceovers, and it's a very guided experience. There are tons of podcasts that purportedly will help you grow your podcast, but almost all of them are just conversations, just two people talking, and you're just a fly on the wall. as a listener. Same thing for the Philly show. There were other shows that interviewed Philadelphia movers and shakers, but Philly Who was the only show that told those people's stories in a very cinematic fashion, just like how I built this with Guy Raz. But instead of just, again, me having a conversation with somebody and the listener's role was just being a fly on the wall when we talk, it was more of a presentation where I was presenting to the listener this information in a very guided fashion. And people lose their minds. They're like, this is so good. And that's what happens with the Grow the Show podcast. People are like, this is so good. I can't believe this. And it's just because we take the time to take the interview, and the show is me presenting the information given to me at the interview to the listener, rather than me saying, hey, listener, listen to this conversation I just had. Not to say that that's anything bad about that, but it's unique. My favorite example, though, of a Cat One premise is, have you ever heard of the show Hot Ones?
Yes, it's one of my, it's who I think of when I try to be a good interviewer.
Exactly. And the reason why you know that guy's a good interviewer is not because he's a good interviewer. It's because they had a Cat One premise. Mm-hmm. They created the only celebrity interview show where celebrities have to eat progressively hotter hot wings while they get interviewed. That's it. There were two independent filmmakers, or however they define themselves, who in LA created a celebrity interview show. Do you know how many celebrity interview shows there are in LA? There's 5 on TV every night. You name it. Virtually everything is just celebrities talking about whatever they're doing right now. But these guys picked, and I'd love to learn more about how they developed this premise. I actually haven't researched it as much as I should, but they picked this really, really unique premise. It's a bit of a shtick, a little bit of a gimmick, but that's what gets people. They're like, oh, cool. That's unique. I haven't heard that before. Then you tune in and find out that I think the guy's name is Sean Evans, is unbelievably talented as a researcher and an interviewer. But I would assert, I don't know if he would agree with this. I'd love to know what he thinks, but I would assert that we probably wouldn't know Sean Evans's name if they just had tried to do a celebrity interview show that didn't have a unique category of one premise. It's the only show in the world that makes them eat hot wings as they go. And that's what got us in the door. So for anybody developing a podcast or even working on a podcast, my question to you is, what puts your show in a category of one? It is truthfully the only podcast on the planet that blank. You can be as creative as you want to make that happen. But in order to say it's true, you have to search podcasts and try to find one that is the exact same thing. And if you do, you have to do something more unique. So that's one thing. That's one ingredient. The second one that I'll say is a good podcast is able to articulate what it's going to do for the listener, what the listener is going to get out of listening. So for shows like ours that are entrepreneurial, sort of business related, it's a little bit easier to say that. Like, I can say, if you listen to my podcast, Grow the Show, it's going to make it easier for you to get more listeners to your podcast and make more money from your podcast. That is the promise that every single episode of the show delivers on, or at least I hope so far it has. Even if you're an interview show, there is some sort of reason, something that the listener gets from listening. There's something that they get. And entertainment shows are the ones that get tripped up on this advice, because they're like, oh, my show's just entertaining. There isn't it's not a business show. There isn't like an outcome. I'm like, I got news for you. There is an outcome. Your show does something for people. It's not just purely entertaining, because entertainment is table stakes. It has to be just entertaining. Entertainment alone, it's like saying my restaurant, my food tastes. It's like, well, yeah, but like, what kind of taste? Is it spicy? Is it salty? So, and the example I love there is a comedy show. Think about what the comedy show does for the listener. Somebody who listens to an hour-long comedy show, and an example outcome could be they used to hate their commute. Now they look forward to it on Monday mornings. How is that for an outcome? A transformation. My life is different now. I actually look forward to my commute rather than dreading it. So those are the two kind of things: a unique Cat One premise, and being able to articulate and really know what your listeners get out of listening to your show. Because if you're not sure, then it's going to be really, really difficult for you to grow it.
Well, for those of you that are paying attention, listening to this on audio and not watching the video, I did just take the note to buy several hot sauces because I need to figure out my Cat One premise.
There you go. And look at the business. Now they're selling hot sauces. Like, yeah, of course. It's just so brilliant. It's so brilliant. It doesn't have to be that shticky, but yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think anecdotally, I'm pretty sure that Bert Kreischer was trying to come on the show, and he's like, actually, we only interview hip hop stars. In the beginning, it was only hip hop stars. He's a super hip hop guy. And then eventually they opened it up. And of course, the rest has become, now they've had everybody on there, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. So if I'm getting ready to start a podcast, number one thing, and I'm saying this, because I like you and you're on the show, but also because it's really helped me. I'm somebody that takes a deep dive when I do things. I was already dozens of hours into YouTube and reading books. And when I did actually get your course and join your group, it's really helped me a ton. I haven't executed everything yet, candidly, but
nobody has. That's okay. It's not meant to be that way.
Sure, of course. But if you're getting ready to start a podcast and they haven't made the plunge to buy